Since the beginning of the web, people have imagined a conversation layer over it. And yet, in 2015, we're still stuck with the same clunky commenting systems, only available on a fraction of the web. In the last few years, a small community has begun to make progress. Their goal is to standardize the model for an annotation, the unit of conversation that this new paradigm enables, and to build it into the very fabric of the web. With an open model for annotations, a world of possible use cases emerges, from personal note-taking to peer review, copy editing, post-publication discussion, journal clubs, blended classrooms, automated classification, and much more. Today, we're announcing that a partnership of over 40 scholarly publishers, platforms, libraries, and technology organizations, among the most important services used by researchers every day, are coming together to make this vision their own and to bring this new layer to human knowledge. Not all of them will be using our technology, but all of them share the vision that the combined solution should be interoperable and standards-based. I'm delighted that a number of these leaders have shared in their own words why they're investing in this work and why it's important to them that it's open.
Personally, to me, just the whole concept of galvanizing collective intelligence is so exciting. I mean, the serendipity and alchemy that I see that comes out of having this additional strata of conversation over publications and over scholarly communication is really exciting.
Well, we're always interested to know how people are engaging with our publications, and we have a large number of open access journals and monographs that live already on the web. So finding out how people can have that conversation on the web about how they're reading, how they're using these books in the classroom and elsewhere is something that we're really excited about.
And I think we're also interested in finding out more about the impact of our work. So we tend to work in a bit of a bubble with our authors, and we produce the publications, and then we really don't know how they're used. And so annotation is a way of us understanding the social impact of the work that we do.
Is this a trick question? How can it not be? I mean, how many different companies have failed by trying to commercialize something like this? I mean, this is truly a public good. This is something that needs to be funded. I mean, SSRN is a for-profit company, so we're certainly not shy on the reason for things to be for-profit versus not-for-profit. I mean, but if it's not interoperable, it's not open, it doesn't work. I mean, there's too many examples of where it doesn't work.
By taking this approach of openness, of standards, and of open source, we enable a massive amount of interoperability, which is, I think, the fundamental idea of science, is that we put our work together in a common body of knowledge so that science as a whole and our scholarly common understanding of nature and society can advance. And so I just view it as the fundamental way, the fundamental principles of science, if you will.
Over the last couple of decades since the web, and even before the web and the internet, we've seen some very powerful demonstrations of what technology can do, but I think too often they've been examples that have materialized in the moment and then disappeared because they didn't have that kind of staying power that an open solution has. When we have an open solution, it's something where we understand the potential and other adopters can take advantage of it. Hypothesis is a powerful example of this, but I think the openness is a key part of it.
Well, it's important to us because we don't want to be married to one particular implementation, one particular vendor. You know, we work with a lot of different people, different technology platforms, and what we'd like to do is, rather than spend all our time agonizing over mapping things, over creating interoperability layers, what we'd like to do is actually say, here's a standard, let's all work with that standard and then focus on the things that are actually important, like how do you make the content work? How do you interact with the stuff that you're actually talking about rather than how it's said?
It's a very noble goal, but aside from being a noble goal, I think it's going to be critical to succeeding in this space. We have, on a day-to-day basis, we're using web, we're using open protocols of the web, HTTP. There are so many applications built on top of that stack, but it works because they're built on top of this interoperable open protocol. And what we're talking about here is creating a technology stack, a platform for capturing the thoughts, annotations, marginalia that happen in the processes of the scholarly workflow. And there are a lot of tools out there which have been used by scholars to capture those things, but they don't interoperate, and they don't go with the scholar from one tool or one platform to another. And so I think the only way we're going to make that kind of material and that kind of activity more usable, more reusable, and more valuable is by getting a large number of people to come together and work on a set of common standards and common tools.
So, we work with a number of different platforms and models, and when we think about trying to create this new type of capability or use this new type of capability, being based on open standards means that it will work across all of these different platforms, and that's extremely important to us. So we're not reinventing the wheel constantly, but also we want to support open standards in everything that we do.
Politically, it's terribly important that citizens of the world feel that they own the public web and that it's not controlled by central providers who want to have a narrow and very often monetary-oriented way of presenting this content. So it's democracy and it's innovation.
Another thing that I think is important about the way Hypothesis has been developed is that it's open, it's standard-based, and it sits on top of whatever you've already created. We here at Michigan Publishing are focused a lot right now on evaluating the way we're producing digital texts, ensuring that they will be accessible and designed so that they're usable and useful for any reader, anyone using any kind of tool. A struggle that I'm starting to become increasingly aware of is platforms that offer new functionality like conversation, like annotation, tend to lock that down. So you can create a digital book using all the best sort of standards and guidelines, and then you have to plop it in this other tool that loses some of that richness and accessibility. Hypothesis sort of sitting on top and itself being built on open web standards means that if we're following good practices here, that won't be lost when we add the functionality of annotation and discussion on top of it. That's really exciting to me.
I think in general, we're increasingly concerned from an academic setting where we are with the idea of walled gardens, of areas of scholarly production being locked up by other entities, and that's become a particular concern here at Michigan in the area of pedagogy and of learning tools, where we're increasingly seeing these very integrated environments being created by commercial publishers. And it's important in that kind of setting that we have tools within the academy that are based on open standards and can be used by anybody.
When we're talking about this conversation stratum or layer, obviously, it's cutting across different silos of information, right? And the potential for this, the way I see it, is all of the ways in which we can compute over and analyze the information that's collected in this layer has to cut across all these boundaries.
I think that the key thing is that everybody is focused on expanded usage, not just the dumbing down of content or finding other markets or selling other things, but really truly taking what's out there and making it more available, making it more usable, making it more information centric to a much broader audience, so that people can find the content that they need, but use that content in a way which is maybe a little bit more specific to them, as other people in their communities start to annotate high quality research or other types of content. They can make connections. They can connect it in ways that just we can't even imagine right now. So I'm excited by the broad breadth of publishers and repositories, content creators, content aggregators that you've started to assemble.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to find a way to use our products to enhance other kinds of communication. Bringing all of our sorts of expertise in visualization and computation, natural language understanding, finding a way to let people use our tools and technology to bring more context, better understanding, better ways of communicating, and adding that to this great annotation layer on top of anything else on the web. I think it's a platform that we've really needed for a long time, and it's been a difficult road to get here, I know, for you guys. And it's great to see this group of people who historically haven't necessarily had a strong incentive to work together, seeing the need for this platform and really rallying behind this technology and this project.
We looked at other tools that were out there for not so much annotation but public discussion, the sort of thing that you might see on a public web page, and even the question of who owns that content was a really tough one to answer. And so I think only a really diverse group with a fairly broad base of support and a lot of representation from the academic perspective of openness is the only way to do it.
Well, as I was saying a little earlier, what we're looking at is annotation in more than one scenario. So we've got it in, not just publishing on the web, which is the obvious one where you have communities that you can build up around different bits of content, but also further back in our production stack where we look at peer review, where we look at the way for people, say, copy editing our content to look at it in a more interoperable way. So I think what we bring is a slightly different perspective beyond the basic use case, and then what we're looking at is introducing annotations at several different points in our production stack.
arXiv has a lot of users. It has a lot of users who've already bought into the idea of rapidly sharing their material. One of the principles of arXiv is that the authors are very much sort of in the driver's seat for putting things out. They submit it themselves, and it is distributed very rapidly. About 100,000 articles come out through arXiv this year. And within that community, the idea of extending this openness to discussion and annotation commentary seems really important.
Well, I think there's no doubt that one of the biggest advantages that we bring is scale. When we do things, we have to consider the scale of what we do each day, especially in regards to PLOS One. So it's important for us to figure out how we bring about, this type of contribution from the community at large, but do it in a way that scales really well. That's, I think, our biggest challenge.
The undergraduate book discussion that happened last month during Open Access Week was really exciting. It was the most sort of engagement that we'd ever seen using Hypothesis on one of these books. And I think that really allowed us to see how timing matters and community matters, and that the tool worked really well to bring together people who were in different places, but all at once sort of agreeing to work on this one book. And the tool was easily available to all of them. Worked for all of them, no matter what sort of device or platform they were using, and that made it possible for this really energetic conversation to take place around this book.
So this is, in the open annotations model, you have the motivations, which basically point to an underlying purpose to an annotation. If you can make those motivations actionable, so in other words, say, delete this piece of text, or replace this or modify this, and provide a substitute, you essentially have the ability to create an editing suite which doesn't actually modify the underlying content until various approvals have gone through. And that I find a very compelling use case, and I think, because I'd like to see something more compelling than something like, say, words track changes, where everything's embedded into a very specific form of markup, or X pointer, similar kind of ideas. Very specific markup, very much embedded in with the content, and it's very hard to keep track of all of these things.
I think the most important thing for JSTOR is that none of us know the answer to what all of this will look like and should look like moving forward. 5 years from now, what annotation will look like for scholarship, for in the broader community. I don't think we know what that should be. We have ideas, and I think what I'm most interested in, and what I most fervently believe, is that the only way we're going to learn is by doing, by experimenting and trying things and putting things out there and then moving on to the next thing. And that's what JSTOR Labs is going to be doing over the next year or two. And that's what JSTOR is going to be doing, and hopefully we can all learn together.
I think a byproduct of the kinds of tools that we could imagine is that how documents get created, how the scholarly record gets created, becomes significantly more efficient. And so we can move away from a workflow where aspects of collaboration and annotation happen on an object that gets passed hand to hand by people, and differences in versions around those conversations become incredibly difficult to track. And people are using tools like track changes and appending v1, v2, February v1, my initials dot second version dot supervisor's comments 3 to the end of their file names, and people are just seamlessly creating knowledge in a collaborative way.
Yes, I think it's really fun to experiment with new forms of review of articles. The idea of closed review by unknown people has been around with us for a long time, and the community is very comfortable with it, but we see a lot of issues which have been widely discussed. I think there isn't a clear way forward where everyone will suddenly change, but I think archives are a really great substrate for experiments in that domain, and I think the new proposals of mathematics and astrophysics journals as overlays on top of arXiv are great ideas, and that's something that we can very easily support. I think the idea of even sort of more radical openness of annotation and how that might feed into assessment of scholarly work is very exciting, or just the use of annotations within a particular limited scope to actually implement a post-publication peer review.
Well, I'm very excited to be involved. I just was in a conversation the other day where a project popped up where they were talking about commenting, because they were a little bit in the dark ages as far as the way that they were thinking about things. And I just briefly mentioned that we were working with you and annotation and what this could bring, and their eyes lit up. There was some pretty stodgy professional group, and their eyes just lit up. It was the possibility that they hadn't even been aware was available to them. It's just exciting times.